The sun had just begun to rise over the ocean when the film crew gathered on the rocky coastline. The waves shimmered in golden light, and the wind carried the salty scent of the sea. It was the final week of shooting for a disaster movie starring Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. The story they were filming was about courage in the face of nature's fury. But no one knew that soon. Reality would mirror fiction in a way none of them could ever forget. Keanu arrived early, as he always did. He moved quietly among the crew, helping to carry props and checking on the safety cables without being asked. He was dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, blending in with the technicians more than the stars. He believed that leadership meant presence, not privilege. Sandra, cheerful but focused, walked onto the set holding her script, smiling at the makeup artist who had been there since dawn. The director, an energetic man named Leo, clapped his hands and shouted for everyone to gather. Today's schedule was tight. They had to capture the big emotional scene before sunset. The clouds above were already shifting, hinting at an approaching storm. The production assistant had checked the weather earlier and reported mild showers later in the evening. No one seemed worried. As the cameras were positioned, Sandra stood on the cliff edge facing the sea. Her character was supposed to shout a farewell into the storm, a symbolic moment of strength and loss. Keanu watched her rehearse from a distance, noticing the real wind catching her hair, giving the scene an almost haunting beauty. During a short break, Keanu approached her. "You okay up there?" he asked softly. "Yeah, just trying to feel the emotion," she said, glancing at the horizon. "It's beautiful today. Hard to believe this place could ever be dangerous." Keanu nodded. Nature can change its face fast. Their words carried a strange weight, though neither realized why. Nearby, a young assistant named Jordan struggled with a heavy light stand. Keanu quietly walked over to help him, tightening the bolts and making sure the base was secure. Sandra noticed, smiling slightly. She had seen him do this countless times, helping without attention, listening more than speaking. He was the calm in every storm. Around noon, the wind grew stronger. The director decided to push for one more take before lunch. The crew hurried to reset the equipment. Sandra stepped back onto the cliff while the camera team adjusted the focus. Keanu's instincts told him something was off. He looked toward the ocean, seeing waves rising higher than before, crashing harder against the rocks. He walked to the director. "Leo, maybe we should wait. The wind's getting stronger." Leo laughed lightly. "It's perfect for the shot." "Looks dramatic." Keanu hesitated. "Just make sure everyone's secure." The director waved him off, too focused on his creative vision. Sandra took her position again. The sound of the ocean drowned out most voices, but Keanu's eyes stayed on the sky. Thick clouds were gathering, dark and restless. Then the first loud thunder cracked. The crew froze for a second, glancing upward. The assistant director shouted for a short break, but the rain began before he finished speaking. It started light, then turned heavy within seconds. People rushed to cover the cameras, pulling tarps over the equipment. Sandra was halfway down the hill when a strong gust almost knocked her off balance. Keanu ran toward her, grabbing her arm just in time. They ducked behind a trailer, both breathing hard. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said between breaths. "It never is," Keanu replied, his voice calm but firm. Thunder rolled again, louder this time. The crew began moving everything into the storage trucks. One of the lighting towers swayed dangerously in the wind. Jordan, the young assistant, ran toward it to loosen the cables. Keanu saw him and shouted, "Leave it!" But Jordan didn't hear. The wind howled, tearing through the tents. Props flew, and plastic sheets flapped wildly. People were shouting orders, their voices lost in the storm. Sandra turned to see Keanu sprinting through the rain toward the tower. Water splashed under his feet as he reached Jordan and helped him pull the cable loose. Together, they pushed the base down to prevent it from toppling, just as lightning flashed above. For a brief moment, everything lit up in white. The rain came harder and Sandra ran to help them. Keanu motioned for her to stay back. "Get inside!" he yelled, but she refused. Suddenly, the wind shifted and one of the larger reflectors came crashing down, hitting a generator. Sparks burst into the air, followed by smoke. Panic spread through the crew. People scattered in every direction, trying to avoid falling debris. Keanu grabbed Sandra's hand and pulled her behind the nearest van. The noise was deafening. Metal clanged against the ground and tents tore apart like paper. Despite the chaos, Keanu's voice stayed calm. "Everyone stay low. Move toward the building." He guided the closest crew members toward safety, checking that no one was left behind. Rain soaked through his clothes, but he didn't care. He moved like he had done this all his life, focusing only on keeping others safe. Sandra, trembling but steady, followed his lead, helping a makeup artist who had fallen on the slippery path. Then came the loudest crash yet. A massive scaffold gave way, hitting the ground near the main camera rig. Keanu looked back and saw a young cameraman trapped under a fallen beam. Without hesitation, he rushed back through the storm. Sandra screamed his name, but he was already gone. The waves now smashed against the rocks below, sending sprays of water over the set. Keanu reached the cameraman and tried to lift the beam, his arms straining. Jordan appeared again, helping him push it aside. Together, they pulled the man free and carried him toward shelter. Inside the storage building, the rest of the crew huddled together, shaking from fear and cold. Sandra waited near the door, watching through the rain for Keanu. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Finally, she saw him walking toward her, drenched and muddy, guiding the injured man with one arm and shielding Jordan with the other. As soon as they stepped inside, everyone exhaled in relief. The storm raged outside, but inside that small building there was silence, broken only by heavy breaths and the sound of rain hitting the roof. Sandra walked to Keanu. Her voice trembled slightly. "You could have been killed out there." Keanu smiled faintly. "So could they. I just didn't want anyone left behind." The simplicity of his words struck her deeply. He sat down, exhausted, and began checking on others, making sure everyone had dry blankets and warm drinks. He refused to take any special treatment, sitting on the floor beside the rest of the crew. Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time, no one flinched. They were safe, thanks to one man's calm courage. Yet none of them knew that the most unforgettable part of this day had just been recorded without their knowledge. The storm had turned the cameras off, but one small drone high above the cliffs had stayed active, capturing the truth of what had happened. The image of Keanu shielding Sandra and two frightened crew members with his arms wide open as debris flew around them. It would remain unseen for days, waiting to reveal the hidden power of kindness and humility. The next morning, the coastline was quiet again. The storm had passed, leaving behind broken equipment, soaked tents, and a shaken crew. Sunlight fell gently over the ocean, but the air still smelled of salt and smoke. The set looked like a battlefield that had somehow survived the night. Sandra walked slowly across the muddy ground, her shoes sinking into the wet sand. She saw pieces of shattered lights, ripped cables, and overturned chairs. A few crew members were already at work, trying to salvage what they could. Their faces were tired, but they moved with silent gratitude, knowing that no one had been lost. Keanu was sitting near one of the damaged generators, helping the technicians fix it. His clothes were still damp, but he didn't seem to care. He had slept barely 2 hours, choosing instead to help move heavy props and check on the injured cameraman. When Sandra approached, he smiled faintly. "Morning?" she said softly. "Morning," he replied, tightening a loose wire with his bare hands. "You didn't rest," she noted. "Not much," he said simply. "Just wanted to make sure everyone's okay." There was no pride in his tone, only quiet concern. Sandra sat beside him, brushing away a strand of wet hair. She had worked with many actors in her life. But Keanu was different. There was no wall between him and the people around him. Fame had never touched his soul. The director, Leo, soon arrived. His expression was mixed with guilt and exhaustion. He gathered everyone for a short meeting. "Listen," he began, "I take full responsibility for what happened. We should have stopped earlier. I'm just grateful everyone is safe." Some nodded silently. Others looked away, still processing the fear they had felt. Leo continued, "We'll resume shooting after repairs. Take the day off, get some rest. Keanu, Sandra, thank you both for what you did yesterday." Keanu shook his head. It was a team effort. No one left anyone behind. Later that afternoon, the crew shared stories over warm tea inside a small hotel near the cliffs. Everyone spoke about how Keanu had run back into the storm, how he had guided them calmly through chaos. But when he entered the room, they fell silent. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Please don't make it a big thing." He then went around asking each person if they had food, if their families had been informed, if they needed help replacing damaged belongings. He quietly paid for a few of the workers whose tools had been destroyed, leaving money at the counter without signing his name. Sandra watched him closely. She had seen acts of heroism before, but never one wrapped in so much humility. Something about his calm made her feel safe in a way words couldn't describe. The cameraman, still resting on a chair, looked at Keanu with watery eyes. "You could have been killed, man." Keanu shrugged lightly. "If I was in trouble, you'd have done the same." The man shook his head. "No, I wouldn't have. Not like that." Outside, the wind had softened, but a deep silence hung in the air. Sandra stood by the window, staring at the gray ocean. She felt grateful, yet unsettled. There was something about that night she couldn't stop thinking about. During the chaos, she remembered seeing Keanu stand in front of her, arms wide open, as debris flew through the air. For a moment, it had felt like time froze. She asked one of the drone operators, "Did any of your cameras record during the storm?" The operator frowned. "I think most of them shut down, except maybe the drone that was in standby. It was still airborne before the signal cut." "Can you check it?" she asked. "Sure, but it might take a while to recover the data." Later that evening, the power came back in the village. The team gathered in the small production office to dry out the footage drives. Sandra helped them label boxes while Keanu worked outside with a local carpenter, rebuilding one of the broken camera rigs. Rain still dripped from the roof, but his energy never slowed. A few villagers had come by to see the set, offering help even though their own homes had been damaged by the same storm. Keanu thanked them personally, handing out food packets and bottled water. One little boy tugged at his sleeve and said shyly, "Are you the hero from the movie?" Keanu smiled and knelt down. "No, buddy, the real heroes are the people who help each other." The boy grinned and ran back to his family. That night, as everyone settled, Sandra joined Keanu outside near the bonfire. The flames danced against the dark sky. She looked at him for a moment, studying the tired lines on his face. "You never stop helping," she said quietly. "It keeps me grounded," he answered. "I've seen how quickly everything can change. One minute you're safe, the next you're holding someone's hand in a storm." She nodded. "It's strange. The film we're shooting is about courage, but yesterday we lived it for real." "Life doesn't follow scripts," he said. "It tests who we are when no one's watching." His words stayed with her. They sat in silence, listening to the ocean. The wind was softer now, almost peaceful. But deep inside, both of them knew something from that day would resurface soon, something they hadn't yet seen. The next morning, the drone operator ran into the room holding a small hard drive. "We recovered the footage," he said excitedly. The drone didn't shut down. "It recorded everything until the battery died." Sandra's heart raced. "Everything?" "Yes," he said. "Even the moment when the tower fell." They connected the drive to a laptop. As the screen flickered to life, everyone gathered around. At first, the footage was shaky. Dark clouds, flashes of lightning, rain whipping across the frame. Then the camera stabilized. What it captured next made everyone fall silent. Through the storm's chaos, a single figure stood firm in the middle of the set. Keanu Reeves. His arms spread wide, protecting Sandra and two terrified crew members behind him as metal sheets flew past. Sparks burst around him, and his silhouette glowed under the lightning. It looked unreal, like a scene from a film. But it was real life. Sandra covered her mouth in shock. The crew stared in awe. One whispered, "He saved them." Keanu stepped forward, eyes fixed on the screen. His expression was calm but distant, as if reliving the moment. After a pause, he said quietly, "Please don't share it online." It was just instinct. "I didn't do it for attention." The director nodded slowly. "Maybe not now," he said. "But one day people need to see what real courage looks like." Sandra looked at Keanu, her eyes soft with respect. "You didn't just protect us," she said. "You reminded us why kindness still matters." He smiled faintly. "Kindness always matters. Storms just remind us of it." As night fell again over the calm sea, the crew felt a quiet peace. They had witnessed something beyond acting, something that no script could write. Yet none of them knew that this story was not over. The world would soon see that moment, and it would change how people saw heroism forever. The next few days on the island were quiet, but heavy with emotion. The production team worked slowly, repairing the set, checking the equipment, and cleaning what the storm had destroyed. The skies were clear again, but something had changed among them. Every person who had been there during the storm looked at Keanu differently now. He was still the same humble man, but his silence carried weight, the kind that comes only from genuine bravery. Sandra noticed how everyone greeted him with quiet admiration. The sound engineer, who rarely spoke, offered him his own raincoat one morning. The camera crew saved him the best coffee without saying a word. The makeup artist, who used to rush through work, now treated him like a friend. Respect had replaced routine. Keanu, however, stayed unchanged. He refused to talk about what happened. He didn't want to be treated as a hero. Instead, he helped wherever he could. He carried boxes, lifted lights, and fixed broken stands. If anyone thanked him, he would smile politely and change the subject. One evening, as the sun dipped into the sea, Sandra found him sitting alone on a wooden bench outside the hotel. His face was calm, but his eyes held a faraway look, as if his thoughts were drifting somewhere beyond the horizon. "You never like talking about what you do you?" she asked softly. He smiled slightly. "There's nothing to talk about. I just did what anyone should have done." She tilted her head, but not everyone would have done it. Some would have run. He looked down, his voice quiet. "Maybe, but running away doesn't stop the storm. It just makes someone else face it alone." His words lingered in her mind. There was something deeply human about him, something that made even silence feel meaningful. Later that night, the director called everyone for a private screening in the hotel hall. He said he wanted to show the recovered drone footage properly, not as proof of danger, but as a reminder of what they survived together. The projector flickered and the room fell silent. As the footage played, the same scene appeared. The violent storm, the chaos, and Keanu standing like a wall of calm in the middle of destruction. The moment the metal tower fell, he had no hesitation. He stepped forward, arms wide, protecting the people behind him. It was raw, real, and almost cinematic in its simplicity. When the lights came back on, there was no applause, only quiet tears. Even the toughest crew members wiped their eyes. Sandra looked at Keanu, but he kept his gaze down. The director spoke softly. "I've worked with hundreds of actors, but what I saw that day wasn't acting. It was humanity at its purest." The next morning, something unexpected happened. One of the local villagers came to the set holding a newspaper. The headline read, "Real Storm, Real Hero." Somehow, a snippet of the drone footage had leaked online overnight. It had already gone viral. Millions of people were sharing it, calling Keanu the real-life protector, the man who shielded his crew like a guardian. The crew panicked at first, worried about bad publicity. But the comments flooding social media were filled with respect, love, and admiration. People from around the world were calling it the moment that showed what true kindness looks like. Keanu was silent when he saw it. He walked out to the beach, away from the noise. Sandra followed him quietly. He stood there for a long time, watching the waves crash softly under the morning light. "I didn't want this," he said finally. "I don't want people to think I'm something special. I just reacted." Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly why they see you as special." He turned toward her, the breeze moving his wet hair. "The internet will forget in a week. They always do." "Maybe," she said, "but the people you saved won't." Behind them, the director approached with a serious expression. "Keanu," the studio called. "They want to use the footage in the end credits of the film. They said it's too powerful to hide." Keanu shook his head. "No, that moment wasn't for the world. It was for us. The world doesn't need to see another celebrity moment. They need to see compassion in their own lives." The director nodded slowly. "Then maybe we can use it differently. Maybe we can use it to help." That night, Keanu met with the local village leader. He learned that several homes near the coast had been destroyed in the same storm. Families were living in damaged shelters, struggling to rebuild. The leader said softly, "The storm hit harder here than your set. Many people lost everything." Keanu's eyes softened. How much would it take to rebuild? The leader hesitated. Enough to give them roofs again. Maybe too much for one man. Keanu smiled faintly. Not too much for a team that just survived together. The next day, Keanu quietly met with the director and Sandra. He told them his plan. He wanted to donate his entire bonus from the movie to rebuild the damaged homes in the village. He didn't want publicity or headlines. He just wanted it done. Sandra stared at him, speechless. You'd give all that away? He nodded. What good is money if people are still standing in the rain? The director agreed to help, promising to match Keanu's donation with a share from the studio. Together they formed a small relief group, calling it the Calm Foundation, named after the peace that follows every storm. Within a week, workers arrived in the village with materials. The crew joined in, painting, fixing, and building. Sandra spent her days helping children draw on the new walls, while Keanu carried lumber and helped the locals rebuild their roofs. There was laughter, music, and gratitude in the air, but even in that happiness, one thing stayed constant. Keanu never took credit. When local reporters came to interview him, he stepped back and said, "Talk to them, not me. They're the ones rebuilding their lives." That humility touched everyone around him. One evening, as the village children played near the beach, Sandra looked at him and said, "I think you've just rewritten what heroism means." He smiled quietly. "I just believe kindness doesn't need a camera." The following week, the studio invited the entire cast and crew back to the city for a press event. The story of the storm had spread worldwide, and everyone wanted to hear from Keanu and Sandra. As they boarded the plane, Keanu looked out the window at the coastline below, the same place where the storm had nearly destroyed everything. Now it looked peaceful, shining under the afternoon sun. He took a deep breath, whispering to himself, "Storms come and go, but kindness stays." He didn't know it yet, but what waited for him in the city would turn this story from inspiring to unforgettable. A shocking truth about the footage was about to emerge, one that would change how everyone saw that day forever. The plane landed quietly in Los Angeles under a golden evening sky. After weeks of chaos, rain, and rebuilding, the crew was finally back home. The press was waiting outside the airport, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions about the storm. Keanu kept his head low and waved politely but didn't stop for interviews. Sandra stayed beside him, matching his calm pace. Inside the car, she looked at him and smiled softly. "You know, you could have made this whole thing about yourself." "People would have loved that." Keanu shook his head. "The moment you make kindness about yourself, it stops being kindness." Their driver took them to the film studio where the director and producers were already preparing for a big press conference. The footage from the drone had spread across the world. Millions had watched it in awe. It was now being called the Storm of Truth, a moment when fiction and reality met. As they entered the studio, the director greeted them with a nervous grin. "You both have no idea how much the world is talking about this. It's everywhere. News channels, social media, newspapers." Sandra smiled. "As long as people take something good from it." "They have," he said. "But there's something else. Something strange." He handed Keanu a tablet. On the screen was a still frame from the drone footage. Keanu frowned. "I've seen this already." "Look closely," the director said. Keanu zoomed in. Behind him in the image, beyond the chaos, beyond the falling lights, stood a shadowed figure near the far edge of the frame. It wasn't a member of the crew. It wasn't Sandra. It was someone no one had noticed before. Sandra leaned in. "Who is that?" "That's what we're trying to find out," the director said quietly. "The storm was too strong for anyone else to be there, but this person is standing completely still." Keanu studied the image. The figure was small, wearing a long coat, head lowered, standing at the very edge of the cliff. Rain blurred their outline, but something about the stillness felt deliberate. The director continued, "We enhanced the video, and we found that right before the lightning struck, the figure raised a hand. Seconds later, the wind shifted direction, just enough to push that falling tower away from you, Sandra." Everyone went silent. Sandra whispered, "You're saying someone saved us?" "Maybe," the director said. "But we checked the attendance logs. Every single crew member was accounted for. No stranger was on set. Keanu said nothing for a long time. His eyes stayed fixed on the image. Finally, he said softly, "Show me the raw footage again." The room darkened as the video played. The rain poured harder, lightning crackled, and for a brief moment, the mysterious figure appeared again, motionless, facing the sea. The wind shifted right after. The tower's fall changed direction by inches, enough to miss Sandra and the two crew members. Then the figure vanished behind the rain. When the footage ended, no one spoke. Sandra felt a chill. "It's impossible." "We were all there." "No one saw them." Keanu leaned back. His face showed no fear, only deep thought. Sometimes life gives us helpers we don't recognize. The next day, the producers arranged the press event. Hundreds of reporters gathered, expecting headlines about heroism and survival. The studio planned to show part of the drone clip to honor the courage of the cast and crew. As the event began, Sandra gave a short, emotional speech about teamwork, resilience, and humanity. Then it was Keanu's turn. He walked to the podium slowly, the hall falling silent. "That night," he began, "we faced a real storm. But the truth is, storms don't test our strength, they reveal it. Every person on that set showed courage. It wasn't about one man. It was about all of us." The hall erupted in applause, but Keanu raised his hand slightly, asking for quiet. "There's something I've learned over the years," he said softly. "Kindness isn't loud. It doesn't need cameras or headlines. It just needs a moment where someone decides to care." His words hit deep. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a second. Sandra watched from the side, her eyes glistening. After the event, the director approached him privately. "We found out something new about that figure in the footage," he said. Keanu turned, curious. "What did you find?" "We enhanced the timestamp and matched it with satellite footage." There was no one physically at that point on the cliff. No footprints. Nothing. But the lightning strike hit exactly where that person was standing. Keanu stayed silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Maybe it wasn't a person." The director frowned. "What do you mean?" "Maybe it was the moment itself," Keanu said. "Sometimes life protects you in ways science can't explain." The mystery only deepened. Some called it a trick of light. Others believed it was an angel or fate or pure coincidence. But for Keanu, it didn't matter. What mattered was what people did with the story. A week later, a global foundation reached out. They wanted to fund more rebuilding efforts in the same coastal villages. The viral footage had inspired donations from around the world. Letters poured in, not of praise but of gratitude. Strangers wrote about how they helped their neighbors during floods, fires, and disasters, saying, "We remembered your calm in the storm." Keanu read some of those messages quietly one night. Sandra sat beside him, smiling. "You see," she said, "you didn't just survive a storm. You started something." He smiled faintly. "If people are kinder tomorrow because of it, then it was worth everything." Later, as he walked outside the studio, he looked up at the sky. It was clear now, stars shining brightly above the city lights. For a moment, he thought he saw a faint flicker near the horizon, like lightning far away. It reminded him of that mysterious figure. Standing still in the storm, he whispered to himself, "Thank you, whoever you were." He didn't know that the true identity of that figure would soon come to light, and when it did, it would leave everyone speechless. Days passed, but the mystery of the shadowed figure from the footage refused to fade. News channels replayed the clip endlessly, calling it a miracle. Some said it was an illusion caused by lightning, others called it fate. Keanu avoided interviews, staying focused on quiet work with the calm foundation. Sandra, however, couldn't stop thinking about that still figure who seemed to shift the storm. One evening, she visited the studio's visual department, where technicians were analyzing the raw drone data again. One of them called her over. "You might want to see this," he said. On the monitor, the enhanced footage played frame by frame. As the lightning flashed, the reflection of the mysterious figure appeared more clearly. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone they all knew. Sandra gasped. "No way." The technician nodded. "Look at the jacket pattern and height. It's Jordan, the young assistant." Jordan, the same boy Keanu had pulled from danger that night. The crew thought he had gone inside earlier. Yet the footage showed him running back into the storm just before the tower shifted. He had tied one final safety rope that redirected the fall. That small act, unnoticed in the chaos, had saved 3 lives. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. He never told anyone. The next day, she found Jordan near the studio cafeteria. He was quiet, humble, and still wearing the same old cap. "You saved us," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, I just held the rope. Keanu did everything." "You went back when everyone else was running," she insisted. He smiled shyly. "I learned that from him." When Keanu heard, he was silent for a long time. Later, during a small crew gathering, he called Jordan to the front. "This story was never about one man," he said, his voice calm. "It was about all of us. Real heroes don't wait for credit. They act when it matters." The room erupted in applause. Jordan lowered his head, embarrassed but smiling. Sandra's eyes glowed with pride. That evening, Keanu told the reporters the truth. He revealed that the mysterious figure wasn't fate or miracle, it was courage in its simplest form. He ended by saying, "Heroes aren't born in movies. They're made in moments." The world responded with even greater respect. People shared the story everywhere, calling it the storm that revealed humanity. Donations to the Calm Foundation tripled. New shelters, schools, and homes rose across the coastal region. And one quiet night, as Keanu stood by the sea again, Sandra joined him. The waves shimmered under the moonlight. "Funny," she said softly. "The storm that almost broke us ended up rebuilding so many lives." Keanu nodded, smiling faintly. "Storms don't just destroy. They teach us who we really are." The wind moved gently across the water, carrying their reflections like a promise that kindness, once set in motion, never truly ends. Weeks later, the world had moved on to new stories, but the memory of that storm still lived in millions of hearts. The video of Keanu shielding Sandra and the crew, followed by the reveal of Jordan's silent bravery, had inspired countless acts of kindness around the globe. Schools showed it during assemblies, rescue workers quoted it in training, and ordinary people shared it with simple captions like "Be kind when no one watches." The film wrapped successfully, but it no longer felt like just another movie. Every scene they filmed afterward carried deeper meaning. The story of survival on screen now mirrored the real courage behind the camera. The final day of shooting ended quietly without applause. Only gratitude. When the director called cut for the last time, the crew gathered on the same beach where the storm had struck. The sky was golden again, the sea calm as glass. Keanu stood beside Sandra, watching the sunset. No one spoke for a long moment. It felt as though nature itself was apologizing for its earlier rage. Sandra turned to him. "You know, I've done hundreds of films," she said softly. "But this one changed me." He smiled gently. "Me too. It reminded me that the strongest thing in this world isn't fame or fear. It's compassion." The director approached, handing Keanu a framed photo. It was a still image from the drone footage, the one where he stood shielding Sandra and the crew, the storm raging behind them. Below it was a small caption, written in simple font, "Humanity is the greatest role ever played." Keanu smiled, his eyes wet. "Thank you," he whispered. But instead of keeping it, he handed it to Jordan. "This belongs to you," he said. "You were the light behind that moment." The young assistant hesitated, tears in his eyes. "Sir, I can't take this." "You can," Keanu replied, placing it in his hands. "Because one day, when someone else needs courage, they'll look at this and remember what you did." Later that evening, as the team packed up, villagers gathered nearby to say goodbye. Children who had lost their homes now played near newly built schools. Elders brought handmade garlands and placed them around the crew's necks. One old woman looked at Keanu and said, "You didn't just bring cameras here, you brought hope." He folded his hands respectfully. "Hope was already here," he said. "We just helped it shine again." Before leaving the island, Keanu visited the rebuilt houses. He walked barefoot through the wet sand, pausing to watch the workers plant young trees along the shore. The same place that once echoed with thunder was now filled with laughter. Sandra joined him, holding 2 cups of tea. You think the world learned something from all this? She asked. He looked at the horizon where the ocean met the sky. Maybe not everyone, he said, but if even one person chooses kindness because of it, then it was worth every second. A soft breeze blew, carrying the smell of rain mixed with sea air. It wasn't a storm anymore. It was peace. Months later, during the film's global premiere, the audience stood in silence as the end credits rolled. Instead of action scenes, the final sequence showed the real footage from that night. The screen displayed Keanu's calm figure, the roaring wind, and the moment he shielded others. Then a line appeared on screen, based on true courage that changed lives forever. The audience rose to their feet. People cried, clapped, and some simply stood in quiet respect. Sandra turned to Keanu and whispered, "You didn't just make a movie. You made the world believe in kindness again." He smiled humbly. "It wasn't me. It was the storm. It showed us what really matters." As they walked out together into the cool night air, thunder rolled softly in the distance, but this time it wasn't frightening. It was a reminder. Storms may come and go, but those who stand for others always leave light behind. And somewhere along the horizon, lightning flickered once, brief and beautiful, as if nature itself bowed in respect.